High School, went on to play his ball at Indiana, then made a pit stop, went over to Seattle, then got drafted to the NBA. Man, give it up for sweet Charlie Brown, man. What's up, legend? How you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm good, man. And I was really, really honored when I got a call from Boo Johnson, Curly Johnson's son, my teammate from DuSable. And I also had an opportunity to look at many of the other interviews that you guys conducted. And I would like to congratulate both you and Marcus, because I think that you guys are doing a wonderful job. I think it's been needed for many, many years. Whomever came up with the idea, I think that it is going to help many of our youngsters. And to believe it or not, it's really helped me and many of the guys that I've spoken with, because it brings back some pleasant memories. It brings back reality to the younger people who might be looking at it to see what happened before they ever started to touch a basketball.
Yes, yes. And Charlie, that is one of the reasons why we did start this show called All Ball Chicago. And then when I heard that we had an opportunity to get you on to join us on All Ball Chicago to talk about some things, because there's some things that, Charlie, I didn't even know. I had to go back and do my homework, and you and your brothers that you played with at DuSable High School back in 1954 was doing your thing. I mean, you guys were representing Chicago, representing the city, representing CPS to the fullest. I mean, you guys went undefeated. You did a lot of great things for the community. The community got behind you in a time when racism was at its peak.
Well, you're right about that, Marcus, because the one thing that ball players who are so involved and focused on that ball sometimes don't pay much attention to what's happening around them. And my message to all young people, and I continue to work with young people even after coming out of the service in 1960, and I'll give you stories behind that somewhere down the line in the interview, was if you don't study your history and you don't know where you've been, you're not going to know where you're going. Right. So it is important for you to understand, if you don't have a plan for yourself, somebody else has a plan for you. You want to operate on your own the guidelines, make your own history, do something that is going to send you down the path of success. And the one message that I've seen in all of the interviews are those coaches, yourself included, and all the other messages that are given by all the other interviewers, is that you must have a plan. You must have a goal. You must focus. You must not be deterred from that, and not to give up. Don't let anybody else make you give up. It is the kind of a plan that you have when you go out on the court. You go on the court, the coach gives you a game plan. You might have some innovations. You might say that, hey, I think this is going to work a little bit better. So make sure that even the life's plan, or someone sets a goal for you, that does not mean that you have to stick to that goal specifically. Jim Brown had plans for us, and what we were doing back then when we were playing ball on DuSable's floor, it was not being done anywhere else. So when we went downstate, you might know that downstate ball was bang, bang, set up one dribble pass, set up one dribble pass. Jim Brown had no idea what he was doing when he made those fast break, full court press, fast break, full court press. We all knew what each other were doing. We could read the minds of our teammates, because we practiced 4 games a day, full court press, fast break, nonstop. He made sure that when we finished, we didn't have time to go out and party and hang out. We were just getting home, get something to eat, and get in the bed because we were worn out.
Right.
And this
Good.
was all year, all year. So I'll let you ask some of the questions, Robert, because I think that some of the things that you might want to know, I want to, and I don't want to drift. And in my conversation, sometimes I might go off on a different tangent. So
Hey, we're gonna roll with you, man. I'm rolling. I'm just rolling.
well,
So Charlie, I want to ask you because Curly kind of gave us a little snippet of, you know, what happened with your team when you guys went downstate. And me and you talked a little bit, and you shared it with me on the phone. But I want some of our listeners to hear the story of that run that you guys did and made it to the state championship game, and basically got robbed. So tell some of our listeners about that your team, who was on that team, and then yourself. That run, that miracle, I wouldn't even say miracle, that great run you guys had.
well, it was close to a miracle, but I'll start from the beginning and what many don't recognize or know about. We won the city championship 2 years in a row. We won it in 53 and 54. And there was another tournament which was even tougher than the playing in the city championship. It was the Illinois Tech tournament at the amphitheater. I don't know whether you know about it, but many of them that don't study the history of Chicago public schools, there was 64 teams in that tournament. And it lasted throughout the Christmas holidays up until the day after New Year's. And you played every day. And it was a morning until nighttime tournament. All 64 teams played every day. And working in the post office during Christmas holidays and trying to do anything else to earn a dollar, and you didn't have too much time to sleep and practice. All of these things, we didn't have buses to go to the games, and we were given that 10 cent to ride that red streetcar and get to that game the best way you could, wherever it was played, north side, west side, south side. Everyone got on the bus, or if you were lucky and somebody had a car, but you had to be real lucky. But most of us traveled on the bus and the L. So going back to who was on that team, there were two teams. Also, people are not aware that there was 2 graduations per year. There was a January graduation, and then there was a June graduation. And half of our team graduated in January.
Wow.
So we lost 3 in 1953. We lost 3 starters, Grant, Randall, and Spears. Those were all city players. And when they graduated, that meant we had 3 guys that come up and take starting positions. I did not start a game until my senior year, but I made all city.
Wow.
Wow. Okay.
I didn't touch a basketball. I didn't touch a basketball until the summer before I went to high school.
Wow.
I followed my brother because of Wabash Y, which is now what do you call it, historical site.
Okay.
That's the only place we were allowed to play. And you could not play basketball or any other sport in the Chicago public schools except for 16-inch softball, and you had to be on the patrol boys to do that. So there were no sports in the Chicago Public League until you got to high school, other than 16-inch softball. So you understand how fast we had to learn what to do. And places like the Wabash Y, I played softball with the St. Mark's Church with Curly Curly Johnson, and Norman Shaw, and and we just had to create activities. So I grew up on 58th and Prairie, 2 or 3 blocks from Washington Park. There was no Washington Park Fieldhouse then. We played on the brick, on the asphalt outside. And guys like Larry Hawkins, he was one of the players. Joe Bertrand, the first black player to play at Notre Dame. Many of the guys from St. Elizabeth, Nelson, all the Nelson brothers, the older ones. I grew up with the younger ones. And when Larry Hawkins, Red Pryor, Julius Jones, and many of the guys that were at the big boys end, I was a shorty. We had to play on the other end all that summer. And the only way that you could play was one day they only had 4 men. And this was on Bud Billikens Day. And if you know about the courts that was on South Park at that time, it wasn't King Drive.
Okay.
You could not see what was going on. They were 2 and 3 deep looking at what was happening on the basketball court. They were 4 men one day and they were short because you got out there at 10 in the morning or before that in order to get a spot. And you know, you lose, you move. You may not you may not get back on for another 2, 3 hours. So somebody was short when they started. I was available. I was early. And the game was tied. You know how to play deuce game, 2 baskets win. Well, Red Pride and Joe Bertrand and anyway, some big names that was in the city of Chicago were on the other team. And having to play on the outside, they had these backboards where it was made out of iron and tin. And they had a dead spot on the backboard. And I knew about that dead spot. You could throw the ball 100 miles an hour and hit that dead spot, it's going in.
Right.
So
it flattens out.
It was a deuce game. And I got the ball. And you know how you get really excited as a young person. The one thing I knew about was shooting the ball. And I threw it at that backboard and hit it and it went in. We won the game. I earned my letter. I earned my spot. That from then on, you know how, okay, I'll take that shorty. Anybody short, that was my spot. And that's how I got really introduced to basketball, because I realized the one thing that the young people have to get, and I heard it mentioned throughout our conversations, confidence.
Yes.
You got to have that confidence. And once you get that, hopefully you don't get a big head.
Right.
But many of the times that if you don't have the proper guidance and direction, you'll know that that's your starting point. That's not the time to go around and stick your chest out like you conquered the world, even though I felt like that. But I had the guidance and the direction. My older brother, Reggie Brown, now he was your principal at King High School.
Yep.
And Landon Cox, Sonny Cox, who got that job when he left Robeson. He was under Charles Redmond at Robeson. Charles Redmond, my mother considered him her 5th son.
Oh, wow.
And that's another story about that, because Charles Redmond, he was at my house all the time whenever we were going fishing. And my mother had 2 passions, fishing and gardening. Charles was with us most of the time. And he learned from my brother, who was mentored. My brother went to Tennessee State, all of them. Tennessee State had a legendary coach called John.
Is it McClendon?
John McClendon. Thank you for helping me out. My mind was drifting a little bit, but like I said, I'm 84, but I still try to remember everything because I practice with my mind. My body is slower, but I'm making it. Anyway, the tutorage that Herb got from John McClendon was secondary to Jim Brown. Herb Brown was a part of the DuSable 1953-54 team. Never played a game, never put on the uniform, but he was a reporter and the manager. And he watched Jim Brown all of the years that he was at DuSable. And what Herb did was he took part of what Jim Brown, what he learned from him, and he took most of what John McClendon had taught him, and went on to win the state championship in 1975 with Phillips High School as a coach.
Yes.
Many people don't know that. And Herb was the only guy at our practices that could take the ball from Paxton Lumpkin. Herb could have started on that team, but Herb was like 5'7" or 5'6". And he didn't believe, or maybe he didn't have what I just mentioned, that confidence to realize he could actually participate and compete. But he was satisfied to learn. He and I graduated from grade school and high school together. He was real smart. He became the coordinator for basketball for the Chicago Public Schools. And as you know, he was running the leagues. He set up the schedules, and also with the schools in terms of what they would do each year and how they would compete, whether it would be at, well, in those days, it might have been at Whitney Young and all the playoff sites, but then might be in University of Illinois and wherever they would play that championship. But he had to do all of that. And when we got ready to go downstate, the other part of that schedule was you only had one team during those days. Someone mentioned you had 1A and 2A. There was no such animal. No such animal. One team from Chicago, period.
Wow.
That was it. And out of all 64 teams, you had to be the champion to go and represent the city. And you know, they talked about the super sectionals and there's none of that.
Wow.
None of that. Just one team, that was it. And it was rationalized in many ways like politicians would do today, but everybody knew the whole score. Everybody knew what the real reason was. And it was not like what they call racism. It was, that's the way it was, period.
Hey, what was the real reason?
What was the reason why there was only one team?
Yeah, the real reason.
Well, it was political. Downstate politics and Chicago was totally different. In other words, they were not allowing, and it was like the North against the South. That's what it was. The North against the South. Southern Illinois was aligned with the South. That's the only way to really explain it.
Right.
Just as my mother and father had to leave Mississippi because there was some altercations that took place with my father and some white man, and my father was threatened. So he having 3 sons, because Herb was the youngest, and I was only 6 months old, we had to leave Canton, Mississippi. And if you heard the history of Canton, Mississippi, to Samuel L. Jackson in that movie, they made Something to Kill, where that was where I was born and my family came from.
I know what Canton is.
Yeah, well, 30 miles from Jackson, right?
Yeah, right outside of Yazoo, right by Yazoo City. Well, I know where it is. I had my boy, my best roommate, man. He stayed in Canton, man. So shout out to Canton, Mississippi, man.
well, I don't know. I didn't know anything about it. The first time I went back to Canton after leaving from 6 months old, I was going through there in 1974. Yeah, maybe later than that. And I took a picture of the post that was outside the town where it gives some of the history. It happened to be about 11 or 12 o'clock at night. And you know how dark it gets down south.
Yes.
Well, I took a picture and I took a flash, and I saw this car moving slowly toward me had a dome on it. I could see it on the horizon, but didn't have any lights on. And I remembered the history of why my father and mother had to leave. So I eased back toward the interstate, hit the gas, and never looked back.
Wow.
You ain't been back to Kansas since, huh?
And no desire to do so.
Right.
But anyway, that's a little side story from what Marcus wanted to know was 1953.
Mm-hmm.
Grant, Randall, and Spears. We won the tech tournament in 1953. And they were the stars and the starters on our team. Paxton and a guy by the name of Edzo Parks, let's call him Tex. They were the 5 men that was on that team. Shelley was playing in center behind Edzo Parks. But then Shelley started very shortly, after they'd gone through the season. But in the mid-year, Grant, Randall, and Spears graduated. So therefore, Curley, Paxton, and Dennis Burns, they started. I didn't start, but I would come in right away, usually, for Dennis Burns. Well, anyway, long story short, we won the city championship with that team.
Okay.
And we only lost 1 game, and that was to Phillips High School. If you guys remember, a guy by the name of Bart Lambert, called him Black Bart. That was the strongest, baddest dude on 39th Street, because he was bad. No
What was his name? What was his name again?
His name was Bart Lambert, but he's no longer with us now.
Wow.
He was a good friend. And the reason why they were able to beat us because we played each other all summer. They knew us. They knew it. There was no fear factor. There was no intimidation, because we were the shortest to them. Rookie Brown, who is the president of the Slow Breakers. You got to get in touch with Rookie Brown.
Yeah.
The Slow Breakers is a group of men who retired, most of them are former athletes or coaches. And being a part of that group and learning what we can do to contribute to the development of young Black men and women and girls, they have actually been instrumental in helping many of the Chicago public school young people to develop. We give a scholarship every year. We have a picnic every year. We have a Christmas party every year. But with the pandemic, all those things are put on hold.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to get in touch with Rookie Brown. And Dennis Boston, he was a former vice president of Johnson Publishing with Jet Magazine. These guys, Julius JB, former coach at Julian High School, Eugene Henry, anyone you can think of, or many of the guys that you mentioned on your program are part of that group.